Good afternoon and welcome. So, Donald Trump says tariffs on allies, Canada and Mexico, will be worth the price. Well, I guess so if he's not the one having to pay it. But anyway, the move to impose new tariffs has bewildered the United States' closest allies and trading partners who have vowed to respond with levies of tariffs of their own. Trump claims that one of the reasons for the tariffs is to motivate Canada to stem the flow of fentanyl from Canada into the U.S. Quote, the fentanyl coming through Canada is massive, he has repeated, and people are getting killed and families are being destroyed. The problem with this statement is it's not supported by the facts. The U.S. Commission on Combating Synthetic Opioid Trafficking report determined that, quote, Canada is not known to be a major source of fentanyl, other synthetic opioids, or precursor chemicals to the United States, a conclusion firmly and primarily drawn from seizure data. Worth the price and bewildered the United States' closest allies and trading partners? Here's why. Because when you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. It's a witch hunt. It's fake news. It's alternative facts. It's a lie. Why is he doing this? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they take place in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus or thereby enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is Trump's tariffs and other misadventures. Why? Well, my guest is the host of Jamarl Thomas's morning show, which you can find on YouTube. Jamarl Thomas, as always, my brother. Welcome back.
Thanks, man. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. And thank you so much for joining the show. Before we get to the tariff fiasco, before we get to that, here's one. It broke earlier today. I'm not sure if you heard this, but according to the Independent as well as NBC News, the Trump administration has already released some immigrants back into the U.S. after touting his administration's aggressive crackdown. An ICE spokesman said that federal court cases limit how long ICE can hold people indefinitely if their countries refuse to take them back. That is leading agents to release some of those already arrested. And Jamarl, that sounds to me like what that brilliant philosopher Yogi Berra would tell us. Is this deja vu all over again? Groundhog Day was yesterday. So this is one of the same things that the Biden administration told us about arresting immigrants is you can only hold them for so long, and then they are by court order to be released. Oh, catch and release. We have to, help Mr. Wizard, catch and release.
Who knew? No, please. I was just going to say, who knew we had lost? Who knew we had lost?
Go ahead.
Yeah, who knew we had lost? I mean, it's like we are. Look, I know Donald Trump wants to be a king. It doesn't quite work that way. I mean, the reality of it is you would want the government to work under a legal order, legal process. And yeah, you can't do any and everything that you just kind of want to do. And by the way, a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump is doing here, it's not legal. Like, I strongly get the sense that there's going to be all sorts of court cases that are going to be flying all over the place over some of the things, whether it's the tariffs, whether it's putting Elon Musk ahead of organizations that he shouldn't be a part of, since, you know, he wasn't elected to a pie shop. Nobody voted for him for anything. And yet, you know, he's supposed to be given access to top secret files into either USAID or, for that matter, the Treasury. Like, this stuff is a little dicey. I guess my point is, regardless of what Trump wants, even if he wants to send people to Guantanamo Bay, you're still stuck under the notion of law. Got to deal with it.
Well, he is dealing with it. He's breaking law. He's as last I checked, treaties are laws.
Yes, they are.
The United States has a treaty with Panama where the United States, Jimmy Carter, signed the treaty turning control and ownership of the Panama Canal back to Panama. And where is Lil Marco today? Lil Marco is in Panama. And what is he telling the Panamanian government? We're coming to take the canal back. So go ahead.
Yeah, this is a stick up. That's what he's telling them. I'm sorry, I'm stepping on you. No, it's a stick up. It's, you know, it's like, give me, you know, drop your britches. You know what this is? It's like somebody, I remember the guy said he got robbed in his car in broad daylight. He said a guy walked out the barbershop, put the guns up, didn't even say anything. He was like, you know what this is? That's what this is. I mean, and you say Jimmy Carter, and they're like, but he wasn't really a president. It was Jimmy Carter, right? I mean, we're not talking about a real president. We're talking about a guy who only lost once. Oh, right. Just like Trump lost the first time around. No, man, they have internalized this. Like, I think we're in a new norm. And what I mean by that new norm, there was a fig leaf. There was a patina associated with the way the United States dealt with countries that we call allies or that we call our friends. And, you know, yes, we pretty much were compelling them to behave in a particular way. But it was kind of like, you know, I describe it like your boss saying, hey, can you go and get X? Or can you go and do Y? He's telling you, he's just giving you this kind of sensitivity to your ego to not be horrible about him asking you. He's being polite. Under normal circumstances, the U.S. seems to get its way with many of the countries that it considers vassals, especially if you talk about Europe, especially if you're talking about Canada. And if it was a Democratic administration and even Republican administrations, we'd be polite, but it was very clear that these things weren't necessarily requests, they were dictates. Trump has come to this new norm where he's like, why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? We want Panama, full stop. We are in spheres of influence. Marco Rubio said it the other day. He said this notion that we are in this kind of unipolar world. Well, that was a fluke. That wasn't something that we could have expected to last forever. You know, Fukuyama got it wrong. This wasn't the end of history. This was kind of a unipolar moment. And we are in a multipolar world. These are spheres of influence. And from the standpoint of spheres of influence, we, the US, will take all of northern continent, North America. Russia would have its stake. China will have its stake. And Europe, yeah, you don't really get a say because you don't really have a sovereign power in this sense. Meaning it's almost as if they're having this kind of new Bretton Woods agreement, this new partitioning of the world in a sense, where from the US's point of view, we want the Arctic, or at the very least, we want Greenland, we want Canada, we want Mexico, we want the Panama Canal, we want to have our own Monroe-esque type doctrine into play going into the future. That seems to be the way he is looking at it, because otherwise I cannot get my head around why this is happening.
Well, you mentioned the brother coming out the barbershop and pulling out the pistol. Well, this also reminds me of Michael Corleone telling Kay the story about Luca, and he says, Michael says to Kay, well, there was a movie director that didn't want this movie made, and Luca told him either your brains or your signature will be on the contract. I'm sorry, it was a music deal. They wanted to release the Don's godson from his recording contract. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Either your brains or your signature will be on the contract. I'm making you an offer you can't refuse. This sounds like a very bad replay of The Godfather.
Yeah, it's like, it's your choice. What was it? I'm going to get you, sucker. The guy said you could take the stairs, or you could take the window, or something like that.
Right.
And after a while, the guy just jumped out the window.
Faster.
Yeah, the window's much faster. The window to get you to the bottom real quick. 9.8 meters per second squared. No, man, it's a new norm. I've never seen anything like it. An American president is effectively, and by the way, these tariffs are not just directed towards Mexico and Canada. The EU is also up for grabs, meaning he is also pointed at them saying, you are next to get it. And not just next to get it. There's this kind of weird double whammy, because on top of saying, not only am I going to hit you with these kind of massive tariffs out the blue for unspecified reasons, I'm also now going to go after you for 5% NATO. So whereas you weren't paying the 2%, now I'm going to more than double that to 5%. Like, it is so bizarre. I mean, on some level, I don't feel bad for Europe about this stuff. I mean, because on some level, Europe has allowed itself to be put in this kind of vassal position, this status. You know, I mean, think about the Ukraine thing, right? I mean, you had a situation where they overthrew the government of Ukraine. They followed the U.S. point of view and dictate all the way through. And all of these things were detrimental to Europe. I mean, you're talking about Germany being deindustrialized. You're talking about many of these countries politically falling apart. You can look at France. You can look at what is taking place in Germany right now, where they're having this kind of new election. You can look at what was taking place in Romania, Georgia, etc. All of these places had pressure applied to them because it wasn't necessarily towing the line. What's interesting for this, though, is if you think back, or if you think about it, when they cut off those pipelines, the U.S. have been complaining about those pipelines for years. And it just so happened that we were able to come up with a pretext by which to blow up one of the pipelines to break the connection between Russia and Europe, and to boot. And by the way, now that that's gone, you can get oil and gas and energy from us for 5 times what you were paying for prior. So on top of paying all of this extra money for energy, you're also paying all of this extra money for weapons. So you're what, $200 billion, and the majority of that is coming to the United States in order to buy weapons for Ukraine. So not only are you putting money into our coffers from the standpoint of buying our stuff in regards to energy, you are also buying our stuff in regards to the amount of weaponry that you're sending to Ukraine. Now, all of this stuff is effectively dragging money out of Europe and putting it into the coffers of the US. And for whatever particular reason, Europe doesn't see it. They seem to be okay with this. It's astonishing. And so at the point where you're being played like that, and then the man turns around and said, oh, you're a sucker. Fair enough. If you want to play the role of a sucker, you can play the role of a sucker. I don't think this is going to work, though. I mean, he is effectively teeing off against the entirety of the world in real terms. And that is not even just external. I mean, if you're talking about him going after Treasury Department, him going after federal workers, him going after these kind of layoffs, trying to get people to effectively quit under suspicious terms of, you might get a contract later on at the point which you quit. Like, this is fighting the blob, and it is fighting external, I can't even call them enemies. I mean, because these people are just vassals. And so it's a very bizarre, confrontational new norm in regards to the way that he's thinking about it. And give me your take on this. What do you think is in his mind on this? And I don't want you to have to go through these dark corners, but this is super bizarre. This is super bizarre.
Since you're asking me that question, folks, welcome to the Jamarl Thomas Morning Show. And with Jamarl Thomas, and I'm Wilmer Leon, his guest today. Now, let me say this before I answer your question, and that is, because I want to just add a couple of little elements to demonstrate it's much worse than you've just even said, because when the United States blew up Nord Stream, They didn't blow up the whole pipeline. There is still one element. There were 3 pipelines encased in this concrete. One of them still works, but the United States won't allow Germany to turn the valves on. So it's not as it's one thing if they blew the whole thing up and totally destroyed, and now your $1 billion investment is at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. But that's not the case. There's one working pipeline that the United States will not allow Germany to turn on. So, and that's not American, that's not an American controlled body of water. It's not an American pipeline. It's not American territory. It's so, and I make that point to demonstrate that it's not just Donald Trump. This is American policy that Donald Trump is merely overseeing at the moment.
Yep.
And you mentioned, and it's been known for a hell of a long time that under the pretext of Russian natural gas and oil has been the deindustrialization of Germany. That's been another very clear objective of all of these machinations. We are going to deindustrialize Germany. And Olaf Scholz stood there right next to Joe Biden. Thank you, Kevin Baptiste, for that $10 super sticker. Olaf Scholz stood right there in the Rose Garden, right there next to Joe Biden as this was being discussed. And he didn't say a mumbling word in English or German, or French or Slovakian. He didn't say a mumbling word in any language that we're known to that humans are known to speak. He may have barked like a puppy, but he did not say anything. And then two, you mentioned what's happening in Germany, and you mentioned what's happening in France. But remember, the first 2 countries that were subjected to this were Greece and Italy about 8 years ago, when through the IMF and the World Bank, financial pressures were put on both. I think it was Greece first and Italy second. What's the term I'm looking for? Austerity measures. Austerity measures were put on those countries, and they just sat in the corner and took the whipping.
Yep. So,
as you asked me, what do I think of this? I'm asked, I'm sure as you are, I'm asked this question quite often. Where is this going to wind up? Where are we headed? And the honest answer that I have is, I don't know. And I think you and I have talked about this before. I don't know, because there's no controlling ideology here. There's no, as I said in the open, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And I don't know what Donald Trump's worldview is, other than, and from a domestic perspective, deconstructing the administrative state, because what's the guy's name? His advisor that went to jail in the first campaign, Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon told us early in 16, or maybe it was probably 15, that the primary objective of this Trump campaign is the deconstruction of the administrative state. He told us that, but from a foreign policy perspective, I have no idea what Donald Trump's plans are, or motivations are, or directions are, because he's such a transactional individual. He doesn't strike me, unlike Steve Bannon, as anybody with a controlling ideology that you can turn to and say, oh, well, I disagree with the direction, but at least I understand. Roger Stone was another one, but Steve Bannon, thank you, Cherie. But Steve Bannon is the one that who I think whose mindset applies directly to this point. So you get my point, Jamarl.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. He's transactional. If he can get a photo op, he'll take it. If he can, get credit for something, he'll take it. There's not or at the very least, it doesn't seem to be a prevailing ideology that is kind of like, and I'm glad you used Bannon, because Bannon is one of those guys that has a prevailing ideology. He has a point of view of the world. Sometimes that stuff trends kind of populist right, but at the very least, there's a point of view of the world. Trump.
So you can have a conversation with Steve Bannon. You can have a debate with Steve Bannon because you have an understanding of what his objective is. And once you and I don't agree on everything, but I have an understanding of the direction that you're going. You have an understanding of the direction that I'm going, and therefore we can have a conversation. But with Donald Trump, whoever, as they say, whoever the last person in his ear is, that's the direction. He's like a puppy. That's the direction he's going to go. The person that puts the treat in front of him is the person who he's going to follow.
Yeah, I mean, they're positive.
A puppy.
Yeah, he's a president. He's not a puppy. He's president. He's not a puppy.
And what did Hugo Chavez say about George W. Bush at the UN after he made the comment about smelling sulfur in the auditorium? He said George Bush is as dangerous as a monkey with a razor blade. And I think if Hugo Chavez were alive today, he would probably say Donald Trump is as dangerous as a baboon with a samurai sword.
Yeah. Yeah. I love these cultural references. That's very cultural, right? That's very specific.
We try.
It's a hard way to go to hear an American say a monkey with a razor blade. That's
well, you made the barbershop reference, so I
What's that cultural reference, right? I grew up in the barbershop.
So we've got all of this hoopla that on the first day we're kicking in doors. We're gonna scoop up all of these illegal immigrants and we're gonna send them back where they came from. And now, Donald, you're doing the same catch and release that you castigated Joe Biden about, and it's not because the policy was flawed, but the problem was beyond Biden's control because, as you said, we are a country of laws. And now, again, this wasn't scheduled for us, but I think this is a natural transition point to talk about Gitmo, to talk about Guantanamo Bay, because now Donald Trump says that he's gonna take all these people, 300,000, I think he said, and send them to Guantanamo Bay.
I thought it was 30,000, but either way,
okay.
What's
270,000 immigrants amongst friends? So it was 30,000. I tell the people I don't keep numbers in my head well, so I get my commas and my zeros confused. But a couple of things, and I'd like to get your, since we're now back to the connecting dots with me, I'd like to, as opposed to the Jamarl Thomas Morning Show, I'd like to ask you a question. I see this whole Guantanamo point as being more marketing than reality. And the reason I say that is I see his reference to Guantanamo as language in an attempt to further demonize these immigrants. And here's why I say that. When I say Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to someone who knows anything about Guantanamo Bay, the first thing that probably comes to mind is terrorism.
Torture.
And so this is a way, this is a linguistic trope to, and Shanice, thank you for that $10 super sticker. This is to me, a linguistic trope to further demonize immigrants and equate them with terrorists.
Yes. I mean, because from his, yes. And I think there are 2 points. One, logically, I'm not quite sure how it makes sense. I mean, if you are running into the situation,
it doesn't make any sense. But
well, practically either. But from a logic standpoint, I mean, we're having a conversation about them sending people home, or at the very least sending people into the country because they can't hold them, but for so long before the law comes into play, where they basically say, okay, we have to let this person go. We can't just keep this person indefinitely. Okay, so what's the point of sending them to Gitmo, right? I mean, if you're saying that you can't even keep them in the country for a specified period of time, unless you're just saying we're going to put them in a gray area, we're going to put them in this kind of, this one of the weird things. I mean, unless that's what they're saying. I mean, like they're going to put them into, because if you remember during the Obama administration, like Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo, it was a gray area. It was this kind of legally nebulous Neverland, where for all intents and purposes, it wasn't really in the United States. And so it didn't necessarily apply to our laws, or at the very least, the government was arguing, well, our laws don't necessarily apply to this. By the same token, we are holding those people, so you would think it would apply to our laws. I mean, torture, for God's sake, was against the law. And yet, we did it. We did it at Gitmo. And so, it's like this question of, okay, well, what is he trying to do here? Is the objective to keep them there indefinitely into a legal gray area? Or is the objective purely rhetorical? Because it could be either, knowing Trump, to be bluntly honest.
Absolutely. But here, and to that point, here's another thing that I don't think has been factored. And this is not only relative to or relevant to Gitmo, this is also relevant to the entire rounding up of immigrants across the board, and that is cost. What I opened with, ICE arresting them and the courts having to let them go, is a clear example of you don't have enough judges to process these people. You don't have enough facilities to hold these people. You don't have enough support staff to manage these people, because when you see an immigrant, there has to be an ICE person, whether it's an agent or an administrative staff person, physically moving that person through the process.
Right.
So when you're now talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that this is going to cost to deal with this issue. And Congress has not appropriated the money to manage this. So Donald Trump, you're just out there, you're in Cartier taking all kind of stuff out of display cases, and you don't have the money to pay for it. And Cherie, thank you for your comment. You joined Sankofa Video and Books with Dr. Gerald Horn this morning. He has another signing of his new book in Washington, D.C. If we're talking about the same book and the same signing, that was this past Saturday night. I was there, and Cherie, I was looking for you. I kept tapping all these beautiful women, asking them if they were Cherie, and I got slapped so many times, I got tired of asking. Anyway, so Jamarl, so Cherie, where were you? So this is just more WWF starring Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean, he ran his entire campaign that way. I mean, if you think about it, the amount of emphasis that Donald Trump put on the issue of immigration was just absurd. Like, nobody had any question that Donald Trump was the guy who was going to hate immigrants, right? That was his thing. That was his mana. Mm-hmm. And so, he gets in office, he wins the race, he doesn't back away from it. And you would think that because of the amount of emphasis that he effectively hit that hammer with, continuously hit that bell with over the course of the election, I would imagine in his mind, however far he pushes on this is fair game. His base accepts it. Like, they're not gonna, are they really gonna say, oh wait, we think Gitmo is too far? No, they're not gonna think that at all. I mean, they're having this kind of DEI stuff that they're bringing up that the base fundamentally accepts. And I would imagine, considering how hard he hit this bell or rung that bell on this very specific issue, yeah, he figures this is fair game.
It's sheer. It's a further example of how he doesn't know what in the world he's doing. And now let's move back. Let's get to the point that we were supposed to start with today, and that is that on Sunday, the president vowed to move ahead with the steep new tariffs on U.S. allies and trading partners. And he says very callously, will there be some pain? Yes, maybe, and maybe not. But we'll make America great again, and it will all be worth the price that must be paid. Well, first of all, he's not the one paying the price, because I don't think he's going to be going out anytime soon and buying a Ford F-150 truck, many of which are made in Canada. Those that are assembled in the United States are assembled with parts from Canada and Mexico.
Yep.
So depending on whether the truck was made in Canada or partially assembled here, you could pay as much as 20% more for your truck, or whatever that percentage is on those pieces. If you drink Crown Royal, you're gonna pay 20% more for that purple bag that you like to have. If you drink tequila, you're gonna pay 20% more from your tequila from Mexico. And those are just some very simple examples of what is going to happen starting tomorrow, because I think that's when Mexico and Canada's tariffs take effect. And I keep getting back to this point. Why? Because you can ask Jack Rasmus, you can ask Radhika Desai, you can ask Linwood Tawhid. You'll be hard to find an economist that can explain to you the rationale behind this.
I don't have an answer. I mean, the best answer I have is he is trying in vain to bring trade back to the United States. I mean, and look, you made a damn good point. Donald Trump doesn't have to go and buy eggs. You know what I mean? Like, this stuff is not going to hit him in the way that it hits everybody else in this country. He's making this art. And in the very beginning, he was saying, oh, it's not going to be a big deal. Americans aren't going to have to pay the price. Okay, well, this is always a lie. This was never true. And the fact of the matter is, this was not something that people voted for. When Donald Trump made his closing argument was, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? This was kind of the quintessential argument for a presidential race, right? Sure. Are you better off, or do you need to change horses? I'm here if you need to change horses. I think things were better with me. And the American public said, okay, fair enough. Things were cheaper, so we'll change horses. We don't like the horse that we're with in this case. And I'm not calling Harris a horse. I'm just making a point. Right. It's a bigger speech.
Using the metaphor.
Yeah, use the metaphor. Thank you. But he didn't go through the entirety of the election making this argument that he was going to have these trade wars. At some point, he pointed out tariffs are a great thing. Okay, well, tariffs being a great thing is a little bit different than saying you are going to get into a pissing match with pretty much every country around the globe, many of which are your allies, and not just are your allies. He's putting 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada with 10% on China. So it's like, so Mexico and Canada take it on the chin.
Oh, wait a minute. And 10% on Canadian gas.
Yeah. I mean, and pharmaceuticals. That was the other thing, right? So even paying for meds, we would have to even pay more for meds. And people, look, don't get it twisted. That is money that we are paying. That is coming out of our pockets. It's not like the capitalists in Canada or Mexico is going to say, well, those good-natured Americans, we're going to eat the cost for those Americans. So screw that. you are going to get hit with that particular cost. And even you're going to get hit with that cost either in the direct or in the implicit. And in the direct sense of you're buying a particular product from one of those places and you're paying 25% more, or in implicit where you could have gotten a price or product cheaper that you couldn't get because it was no longer on the marquee in the sense of something that you could buy at that price point. And then, Canada, Mexico are effectively telling their people, find somewhere else to sell your products, find somewhere else to sell your goods. We need to move this stuff away from the United States. I think if I give him the most generous impression, he is stuck with a dilemma. How do I bring jobs, industry back to the US when we are now back at this thing of spheres of influence? And we are going up against, let's say, China, Russia. We're going up against BRICS nations where all of these guys are working together in tandem, almost as a unit of some sort, even trying to get to the point of de-dollarizing. If we are vulnerable, how do I ensure the integrity of this country going into the future? Okay, well, part of that is I need to get trade and jobs back into the country. Okay, how do I do that? And somewhere along the way, he came up with, well, we can use tariffs in order to protect our industries here in the US. And so instead of buying a car in China, EV vehicle for like $15,000, that's better than a Tesla. Okay, well, you put a tariff on that in order to protect Tesla. Or you put a tariff on some of the other products in order to protect the industries here in the United States that can't necessarily compete if you open up to the rest of the world. Huawei, maybe another example. TikTok even may end up being a certain example, even though those aren't tariffs. But basically, how do we protect American industry moving forward in this kind of globalist market where we no longer have the capability of maintaining complete dominance in the way that we did after the Second World War? Now, the problem with this is that, A, I am very doubtful that you're going to be able to bring those jobs back. B, that is a higher price point and a significantly higher price point. Like, it's one thing if you were paying somebody $3 an hour in Philippines in order to build something, and then you ship it back into the United States. Yeah, there are all sorts of issues with jobs being shipped overseas and everything else. But understand, if that product comes back into the United States in order to be built, you're talking about paying $15 to $20 an hour from that $3 an hour. In which case, yes, you may have protected a job, because I don't know if people are going to buy a product at that particular price point. But beyond that front, you are Americans now who are already having difficulty dealing with things like inflation will get hit with inflation. Now, they may not call it inflation. They may call it this kind of shocks associated with the price increase from the tariffs and from the trade war that he seems to be having with pretty much every country around the globe. But it's still, from the standpoint of an American who's in the country just kind of minding their own business, they are now paying more. And they've been dragged into something that nobody voted for at all.
No, 77 million people voted for this crap. 77 million people voted for this crap.
I don't think they voted for a trade war. I don't think they voted for a trade war.
Well, that's that's on them, because they were told by Donald Trump when he said, I'm going to impose tariffs on China.
Yes.
We did this analysis. We had these conversations. Now, whether or not they wanted to listen to us, well, then that's on them. But no, I agree with everything you said except that last point. They were told by him that this is what he was going to do. And if that got past him, well, that's no, I won't make that reference.
But see, China, yes, but Europe, Canada, Mexico, like, this is not.
No, okay, I'll give you that. But
I mean, that's very bizarre. Like,
no, you're right. It's not bizarre. It's stupid. It makes no sense.
Yes,
it makes no sense. And here's the thing. Here's one of the things. Well, hang on a second, because Cherie asked, I think it was Cherie, what was the impact of, what did NAFTA do about corn production with Mexico? Let me rephrase your question. What did NAFTA do to corn production in Mexico, decimated it.
Yeah.
Because American yellow corn is an invasive species to Mexican indigenous multicolored corn. And when the U.S. produced corn, yellow corn made its way into Mexico, that yellow corn cross-pollinated with the indigenous Mexican corn and killed it. That's what happened, Cherie, with corn production in Mexico as a result of NAFTA. But getting back to, for example, this 10% increase in the price of gasoline coming from Canada, that is going to be, from what I've read, primarily felt in the Midwest, because that is where a lot of the Canadian produced gasoline goes, because that Canadian oil is a heavier crude with a higher sulfur content. Mm-hmm. And so it is refined in different refineries than the sweeter crude that gets refined in Texas. So a lot of those very Midwest, red state, MAGA hat wearing, Trump loving Americans are about to find out exactly what they voted for and why. This is going to hit their trucks, and they're the folks, to a great degree. They're the farmers that buy the F-150 in Idaho, in Iowa, in South Dakota, North Dakota. You're all the ones that are buying these Ford trucks. Now, what you can do, buy Chevys? I think not, because you all don't shift brands like that. The Ford F-150 is the most popular truck in the United States, and it has been for years for a reason. And so y'all are about to bite the bullet on this one. And Donald Trump, the guy you voted for, don't give a damn about your pocketbook.
He does not. And by the way, NAFTA, if you remember when Donald Trump was in office, 4 years ago, didn't they do another deal to redo NAFTA? Because Donald Trump wanted a headline of, hey, I renegotiated NAFTA. Right. We were being taken advantage of, and now I've redone the deal, and now everything is great. My name is Donald Trump. And now, 4 years later, they're taking advantage of us again. It's like, okay, dude, so the deal that you made 4 years ago, somewhere along the way, that lost steam, that fell apart. In which case, you now needed to go back on that deal and basically renege on whatever deal you came up with now pass sanctions on these places. And let's be honest, BRICS. Like, let's Wait
a minute. Because before you go to BRICS, I want to be sure I make this other point that was relevant to what you just clearly laid out. And because you were talking about what's going to happen with the jobs. You made the point about this goes back to probably Bill Clinton bringing jobs back to America. We're going to bring these jobs. Clinton has said it. Obama said it. Biden said it. We're going to bring jobs back to America. No, you're not. And not only for the reasons that you very clearly and accurately articulated, but here's an even more fundamental reason as to why not. Because there is no industrial policy in the United States to manage the process. Mm-hmm. You're trying to sell U.S. steel to Japan. We were once the world leader in the manufacturing of steel. And you now want to, folks, it's not Jamarl Thomas, it's not him personally, it's not his fault. You now want to sell U.S. steel to Japan. There is no industrial policy. How are you going to expand your auto manufacturing? You're not. How are you going? You can pick any durable good you want to. Refrigerators, washing machines, dishwashers. I used to ask my students this question years ago when I taught at Howard, but now the question is so antiquated. I would ask my kids, when was the last time you watched a television made in the United States?
Oh.
And they would look at me and blink, and they'd say, oh, well, we have a GE made in Mexico. Oh, we have a Zenith assembled in Mexico. The last television made in the United States, Jamarl, I'm testing your age here. Did you ever hear of Curtis Mathis televisions?
No.
That shows you how long ago it was.
And what is it called? Curtis Mathis?
Curtis Mathis was the last, by my research, huh?
It was called CM, right? It had the trademark like a C and an M and a spot.
Right.
Okay, I'm aware of it. I don't know the last time I've seen one of those.
You haven't seen one because they went out of business 25 years ago.
There you go.
So, but that was by the research I did when I was paying attention to this stuff. That was the last American-made television was a Curtis Mathis television, and Cherie says Zenith is made in Mexico. They aren't assembled in the United States anymore. Cherie, not by the last time I checked. So all of that to say, and now you can move to the BRICS conversation. There is no industrial policy here, and before you can start bringing jobs back to the United States, you have to have an industrial policy to manage that process.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, tariffs are not a policy. That's a tactic. That's a
knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
And that's economic warfare. That's not a policy. That's economic warfare.
And by the way, being waged across the globe at once. Like, it's not even like, it's not like he's taking somebody in the corner and shaking them down. He's doing everybody at once. Basically, we're going to go after Mexico. We're going to go after Canada. Right. We're going to go after China. We're going to go after the European Union. We're going to go after everybody. Everybody's fair game. And it's like, okay, you think that's going to go well? I mean, that's the entire reason that BRICS even exists right now. Because of the way. No, please.
And here's another element to this that shows you he doesn't understand economics. Zhao Yun, I think RCA is assembled in Mexico. Another one of the rationales he used for this trade war is trade balance. But and I need to talk to Dr. Jack, or I need to talk to Dr. Tawhid or Dr. Desai, but I think one of the major contributors to the trade imbalance is the American bond market, because we keep going overseas to finance all of this deficit spending. We are selling bonds to foreign countries. That goes on the negative side of the ledger in terms of GDP. Mm-hmm. So you won't be able to balance that trade deficit through tariffs because you're financing your trade deficit. You're financing your fiscal deficit with bonds.
And some of those are American companies. Like, we're talking about China, for example. You would have a lot of those companies being American companies who set up in China so they can ship products to the US. And so you may have a trade imbalance, but it may not be, in the way that we think of a trade imbalance. I mean, he's given this kind of connotation like we are buying X amount of stuff from them and they're only buying X amount of stuff from us. I mean, one, Canada is not a huge economy. I remember Texas, the governor of Texas pointed out, it was like, hey, watch it, Canada. Our economy is bigger than yours, which is astonishing if it's true. That can't be true. That can't be true. This stuff is just, it's a knee-jerk reaction that doesn't seem to have any kind of underlying theory or even strategy associated with it. It's just
Robert says Harley Davidson bikes only have only have their motors made in the U.S. That's right, because they're assembled in Milwaukee. I think, which is one of the reasons why the Republican convention was in Milwaukee. Harley Davidson bikes only have the motor made, in everything else is abroad. That's a perfect example of the global supply chain.
Yep.
You can't turn the clock back to the time when the supply chain was domestic. The supply chain is now internationally integrated. The Apple iPhone, I think, is assembled in China.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so Robert Ray, the Apple iPhone is assembled in China. The Tesla batteries come from China. The Fender guitars. There are Fender guitars made in the United States, but a lot of Fender guitars are made in Mexico. These are, I mean, we could go through this for years, and so we'll just so your point, Jamarl, about NAFTA. About BRICS. You were talking about.
Yeah, the BRICS thing. You know, they did that on purpose, by the way. They went with the idea of globalism because they thought we'd always been lead. You know, we have the most dominant economy. We put out trillions. We have a better industrial base. Europe and the rest of the world have been fundamentally destroyed after the Second World War. We are clearly superior. We're better because, you know, we're just better people. We're indispensable. And somewhere along the way, but it's like, oh, wait, you mean China can supply the entire globe by itself if it needed to? Okay, you know, maybe this globalism thing has gone too far. And maybe, you know, we need to protect American industries. We need to do this. We need to do that. The thing is, we decided we wanted to be the reserve currency. Fair enough. And you can use that kind of liquidity all around the world. You can do that. Fair enough. But as long as you're not using that as a weapon, meaning if you can put it in anybody's hand and they can use it without any kind of stress, any kind of friction, the world is going to be fine. But the moment that you get to the point where you decided, hey, they need this product and we can weaponize this product to go after countries that we don't particularly like. No, we don't have a right to do it. But, you know, who's ever given a right? Things are taken, right? It's like, this is, you're not asking for permission. You're doing something because you have the capability of doing it. With the consequence being that countries get sick of you using that dollar as a weapon, sanctions as a weapon, or you throwing your weight around in a way that is adversely affecting their economic security. And so like anybody else, you know, the moment that you put a gun in space, this other guy is also going to put a gun in space just for balance. Well, you have all of these groups and countries that we are sick of this. We don't like the way this country is acting. We don't like the way it unilaterally uses sanctions. We don't like the way it bullies. We need to do something different. Oh, I know. Why don't we work together for common good? And you end up with this kind of BRICS system as a direct result of the way that we kind of throw our weight around, or for the matter of the way Europe lumps in and throws its weight around. There's a great interview, I believe it was an interview with Joe Biden, where they asked Joe Biden about, Joe Biden says something like, well, hey, why don't all of you get together? And he's laughing as he's saying this, believing that, oh, well, this is completely impossible. Okay, well, fast forward. Not so much. Not so much. And by the way, Marco Rubio just had an interview where I believe he's talking to Fox. And he's saying how Brazil and China just made a deal where they don't need to use the dollar for that deal. This is all being done in their own currencies, which means that this is something that is completely off the reservation from the standpoint of clarity by the US. And he's saying that is the future. This is a problem. And so do you think this is going to hasten that, speed that up? Or you think it's going to slow that down? And I guess my point is the entire rationale for BRICS existence on some level has to do with a lower level version of what Donald Trump is doing now. We're at what, 50%, give or take, in regards to the usage of the dollar, in regards to the reserve currency that was at 70-something% about 20 years ago. The numbers go down faster. This is only to make it worse.
I wonder if Lil Marco ever heard, there was a group I'm sure you've heard of, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Wake up, everybody. Lil Marco, Brazil and who'd you say it was? Brazil and
China. Yeah,
China.
I believe it was Brazil and China.
Marco, you're just getting hip. I guess not only to your diminished stature, but I guess he called you Lil Marco because you're always late to the game. Carol, thank you so much for your $2 super sticker, and the Sudan, the Congo, and South Africa need our attention also. Oh, and we are never
South Africa.
Absolutely, we're never remiss at covering those issues. So thank you, Carol, and we'll be sure that before the week is out, there's even more attention paid to the Congo, South Africa, and the Sudan. Jamarl, if you can give me just a couple more minutes, there's another. I'm going to combine two stories because I think they are tangentially related. One is USAID security leaders on leave after trying to keep Musk's Doge from classified info. So Donald Trump imposes a 90-day moratorium on foreign aid. Then Elon Musk goes to USAID and tries to get access to security data from USAID. Musk's Doge crew lacked high enough security clearance to access the information that they were seeking, according to John Voorhees and Deputy Brian McGill. And so they have been put on leave because they would not grant Musk's Doge access to that data. Then the other story is Musk's Doge Commission gains access to sensitive treasury payment systems.
Outrageous.
So on the USAID point, and Jamarl, this is something that I don't think many people have paid that much attention to, is that why would USAID, what is the information that Elon Musk is trying to access through USAID? Well, what does USAID do? It is a CIA cover for regime change.
Yes.
And USAID is the government entity along with the NGO, the National Endowment for Democracy, that the United States government uses to go in and overthrow countries.
Yep.
Perfect example. Remember that truck caravan on the border of Venezuela that had USAID food all in it? And it was alleged that Maduro blew up the caravan when in fact that was all a contrived event trying to turn international sentiment against Nicolas Maduro, president of Venezuela. So I just wonder, why is a non-elected official who is now the head of a totally manufactured entity called Doge trying to gain access to security information? Is that a sensible question to ask?
That is a fantastic question, because that was it's funny, I have such mixed feelings on this. So in one sense, it's like, okay, Elon Musk wasn't elected to a pie shop. This is a made up government organization that they are pretending as if it's some legitimacy associated with the organization. And you are giving
wait a minute. Let me show you how fake it is. It's so fake that Vivek Ramaswamy had to quit. It is so fake that the big fake Vivek Ramaswamy, and you know what? You got Lil Marco as Secretary of State. The big fake Vivek Ramaswamy, because if you've ever seen him, he ain't big. That dude is 3 feet tall, and weighs about 73 pounds. Doge is so fake, even the big fake had to quit it. Go ahead. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
Well, I think he got fired. I think he got driven away, frankly. I mean, he may say, I stepped aside. I mean, look, man.
Leave before we throw you out.
Right. Yes. I mean, for one, you look very foreign. And on top of looking very foreign, you've told us that these good Christian white men, who we believe are the pinnacle of getting any job, you've told us that they were lazy and they were not brilliant enough, and that we need to get foreigners into the country itself. They seem to be okay with Elon saying that. They don't seem to be okay with Vivek Ramaswamy saying, I wonder why. Yeah, I wonder why. I guess my point is, in the way that they are functioning, it is super bizarre. God, man, like I said, I have mixed feelings. In one sense, Elon Musk should have nothing to do with any of this. Full stop. I mean, the Washington Post had just reported that he had put $288 million into Donald Trump's campaign. $288 million. Donald Trump only raised, what, like $400 million?
That's not quite right. He contributed that amount of money to the Republican Party and Donald Trump's campaign.
I see. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's still an ungodly amount of money that you're putting into somebody's campaign, and it feels like a bribe, like a payoff. Elon Musk, the only thing that Elon Musk cares about is the influence, the access. You know, I'm this close to the president. I have this much control over policy, and not just control over policy, even to the point where I am going to the Treasury and getting my hand on sensitive data, which is, again, astonishing. On the other front to that, I'm glad to kill USAID. I'm glad to kill USAID. I mean, because for all of this talk about, oh, it's a humanitarian thing, and we are helping people around the globe, and we're feeding people. It's like, dude, who are you playing this role with, right? I mean, overthrowing the Ukrainian government in one part was being paid by USAID. The attacks on Georgia was on some part being paid by USAID. I mean, even the threats that are taking place against the other European capitals that weren't necessarily toeing or falling in line with US policy, or for that matter, European policy in regards to the war stuff. Again, pressure. When you have all of these NGOs, it was like a third of the groups that were picked up in Georgia when they were trying to overthrow the Georgian government were foreigners. I mean, like that money was coming from somewhere. I mean, even the Ukrainian media, like the report that came out that said 90% of the media in Ukraine was paid for by the State Department. Okay, that's pretty astonishing. 90%. So when the US media was picking up stories from the Ukrainian media, then that was effectively just coming from the State Department. I mean, it would be like during the Iraq War, Dick Cheney, I believe he was talking to Judith Miller. He was an anonymous source for Judith Miller. And Dick Cheney would do this thing where he would go out and he would reference the paper. And he would say, well, I saw in the New York Times that it said so and so and so and so and so. Now, keep in mind, nobody knows that Dick Cheney is the anonymous source. So Dick Cheney is effectively referencing himself as he's going out and giving a story. It's the same thing, right? I mean, to the point where you have 90% of the media being paid for by the State Department, when the US media references Ukrainian media, they're just referencing stories that are coming out of the State Department. It's super bizarre. It is something very weird that billionaires have taken this kind of position, not just content to be behind the scenes, but active in your face with their fingers on the controls of these organizations. It's very strange.
It's not really that weird, because that's the basis of the Powell memo from Lewis Powell and the Citizens United case. This is now, we have now come to realize and experience what the whole intent and mission was by Lewis Powell with his 1973 Powell memo and the resulting Citizens United case. And let me just quickly say, Kevin Baptiste, you say you clowning Wilmer. Kevin, let me ask you, are you from Louisiana? And the reason I asked that is because that was my dad, boy, don't clown me. That was my father's line. Don't come up here trying to clown me. No. And if my father felt you were doing that, boy, you were in for it heavy. Anyway, so Kevin, thank you very much for having me think very fond memories of. Oh, you're from Oakland. Well, that doesn't mean your folks aren't from Louisiana, Kevin, because most of my people over in East Oakland are from Louisiana. So, and what you'll find, particularly with African Americans in Oakland and Los Angeles, there was a great migration north, there was a great migration west. And so you'll find in LA and in Oakland that people are no more than 2 generations removed from Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Anyway, so Jamarl Thomas, let people know about the Jamarl Thomas Show, the Jamarl Thomas Morning Show. And I think you're scheduled tomorrow. You're going to have a monster on tomorrow. I mean,
yes, I am.
You're going hard tomorrow.
Yes, I am. 7:15 a.m. The man himself, Wilmer Leon, he will be on the show. Hey. He will be on the show. So Jamarl Thomas Morning Show. You can check me out on YouTube under Jamarl Thomas. You cannot check me out on Twitter because my account has been stolen. There's an impersonator that had occupied my account, and Twitter sucks. Serenity now. I'm not going to go into it. But you can check me out on YouTube at Jamarl Thomas. I'm also on Rumble, but I'm also have a presence on YouTube.
And Kevin Baptiste just said both parents are from Algiers, Louisiana. See, I knew, man. I knew. Don't tell me.
Right.
And Sandra Muhammad says, I'm from New Orleans. You're right, Dr. Leon. So Kevin, if you know any Leons in Oakland, they are relatives of mine. And I can't endorse them all, but most of them I think are pretty good people. anyway, hey, Jamarl, my brother, thank you as always, man. Greatly appreciate it. The audience loves you, and for a great reason, because your analysis, and Carol, thank you for that $1. Your analysis is phenomenal. Your work is beyond repute or refute or whatever the word will be. And I truly appreciate your time and your analysis.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. You have a good one.
You too. Talk to you tomorrow.
Alrighty.
Jamarl Thomas, my dear brother, thank you for joining me today. Hey, folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. New episodes every day. Also, please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. We do this for you, but can't do this without you. We truly need contributions, because we're about at a point where we're going to have to make some very hard decisions, and they're decisions that I don't want to have to make. You can find all the links below in the show description. This is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because remember that talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a beautiful remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.